Gravity makes you strong, but stubbornness makes you immortal. The reactor core pulsed with a blinding, rhythmic violet light, the heat radiating off the shielding enough to blister skin through armor. I slammed a fresh thermal clip into my rifle, my back pressed against Alara's. I could feel the rapid hammering of her dual hearts through our hardsuits, a staccato rhythm against my own spine. We were outnumbered, cornered, and bleeding, yet the air between us crackled with something far more volatile than the localized radiation. "They are breaching the blast doors," Alara shouted over the roar of the cooling turbines, her voice tight but devoid of fear. She was Aethorian, a species of warriors the galaxy colloquially called Space Orcs, due to their towering frames and tusks. But right now, she wasn't looking at me with the disdain her kind usually reserve for humans. She was looking at me like I was the only thing keeping the universe anchored. "Let them come," I grinned, wiping sweat from my eyes. "We evolved to break. They evolved to endure." 12 hours earlier, the only thing in danger of breaking was my patience. The erratic negotiations on Outpost Zenith were failing. As the security chief for the Terran delegation, my job was to stand still and look harmless while the Galactic Council debated the relevance of humanity. The Aethorian High Council sat on their raised dais, viewing us as fragile, short-lived creatures reliant on external tools. To them, we were soft. "Your species lacks the biological imperative for dominance," Counselor Kale sneered, his massive hand resting on the table. He was projecting hard power physical intimidation meant to dictate terms. "You require suits to breathe, engines to move, and computers to think. You are not an apex predator." I remained silent, observing the play of soft power my ambassador was attempting to deploy, using cultural adaptability and economic incentives to weave a new alliance. It wasn't working. The Aethorians respected only visceral strength. Then the station shuddered. A catastrophic pressure failure alarm screamed through the sterile white halls. The floor tilted violently as an explosion in the lower maintenance sectors rocked the station's gyroscope. "Sector 4 decompression imminent," the computer announced coolly. We scrambled toward the lifts, but the emergency protocols were faster. In the corridor ahead, a massive hydraulic bulkhead began to descend, sealing off the breach. The problem was the maintenance crew trapped on the other side. 3 technicians were sprinting for the gap, but the fail-safe mechanism was designed to preserve the station, not the people. The Aethorian guards hesitated. Their biology was built for explosive bursts of violence, not rescue operations against industrial machinery. They saw the math and accepted the loss. I didn't. I sprinted, diving under the falling slab of plasteel. I didn't use a jack or a localized gravity field. I planted my boots on the deck and drove my shoulders into the descending metal. This was the difference between a sci-fi fable and reality. Human ingenuity isn't just about building faster ships, it's about overriding our own safety limiters. My knees buckled under the crushing weight, the hydraulics screaming against my resistance. My muscles tore, capillaries burst, and my vision blurred into a tunnel of red static. "Move!" I roared at the technicians. Alara froze on the safe side, her golden eyes wide. She was witnessing the terrifying truth of a Deathworlder. "We are persistent hunters. We don't just strike, we outlast. We burn our own energy reserves to total depletion if the goal requires it. That is the Terran spirit." As the last technician scrambled through, my arms were trembling violently, sweat pouring off me in sheets. I looked up, locking eyes with Alara. The arrogant dismissal was gone, replaced by a shock of electric recognition. I let the door slam shut, collapsing to the floor as the airlock hissed. Diplomacy failed until the bulkhead door refused to close, and in that moment, the true negotiation began. The skirmish in the reactor core was a blur of violet light and scorching heat. The sabotage by the Aethorian purist zealots fanatics who viewed any alliance with humanity as a contamination of their bloodline had turned the engine room into a kill box. "Cover me," I yelled, sliding across the deck plates. Alara didn't hesitate. She stepped into the line of fire, her pulse rifle singing a lethal aria. Beside her stood Kale, the very cousin who had insulted me at the negotiation table. Hours ago we had stood in the combat arena to settle the dispute the old way. He was an ambush predator, built for overwhelming, instantaneous force. He had battered me for 10 minutes straight, but I was a persistence hunter. I absorbed the punishment, waited for his lactic acid to build up, and when his massive limbs grew heavy with exhaustion, I struck. I didn't beat him with strength. I beat him with the terrifying human capacity to simply refuse to stop. Now that same durability was the only thing standing between Outpost Zenith and a supernova. The coolant override is jammed, Kale roared, putting a massive fist through his zealot's chest plate. It requires manual torque. I'm on it. I scrambled up the gantry. The heat up here was enough to melt synthetic weave. My hard suit screamed warnings, but I forced my gloved hands onto the red-hot manual release wheel. This was the essence of a great science fiction story brought to life, not the lasers or the ships, but the human ingenuity that sparks when the technology fails. The wheel wouldn't budge. It required more than mechanical force. It required the will to burn. I gritted my teeth, throwing my entire body weight against the resistance. My muscles seized and the pain was blinding. A white-hot lance driving through my shoulders. Below me, Alara looked up. She wasn't firing anymore. The last zealot had fallen. She saw me straining, my body pushed beyond the red line. For a species that worshipped the apex predator, she was witnessing something alien. I wasn't stronger than the metal. I was just more stubborn. "Come on," I screamed, the sound tearing from my throat. With a shriek of tortured metal, the valve gave way. The coolant flooded the chamber, turning the violet warning lights to a steady, cool blue. The hum of the reactor dropped from a scream to a purr. I collapsed against the railing, chest heaving. Before I could slide to the floor, strong hands grabbed me. Alara pulled me up, not with the delicate touch of a diplomat, but with the fierce grip of a warrior claiming her own. The heat radiating off her armor mingled with mine. "You are insane," she whispered, her forehead resting against my helmet. "You possess no claws, no hardened scales, yet you fight as if death is an inconvenience." "That is the Terran spirit," Kale grunted, stepping up beside us, his respect finally earned. "You break so you can be rebuilt stronger." The aftermath in the council chamber was different this time. There were no sneers from the Space Orcs on the high dais. The concept of soft power had been overwritten by the visceral reality of survival. We hadn't just debated for our seat at the table. We had bled for it. The Aethorian High Elder looked from Kale to Alara and finally to me. The structural engineering reports of the saved bulkhead and the stabilized core lay before him, proof that while Aethorians were built to conquer, humans were built to solve. "The isolation laws are hereby rescinded," the Elder announced, his voice thundering through the hall. "Let it be known that on this cycle the Death Worlder proved that the strongest steel is forged not in cold, but in fire." Alara took my hand, stripping off her gauntlet to let skin touch skin for the first time. The shock was electric, a promise of a new future. We had proven that while gravity binds us to the ground, it is our defiance that lifts us to the stars.